It had a 600 horsepower engine, an 18-speed gearbox, was 28 metres long, and I decided that it would be a good opportunity to drive one of these new trucks between Melbourne and Sydney. We started at 5 o'clock in the morning, and by about 7 o'clock my co-driver said, "There's a lovely roadhouse. We should call in for breakfast." I said, "That's a good idea." So I pulled this truck in. I was very proud of the way I parked it, and we walked in to this roadhouse for breakfast. In the corner, way up the back, was a little old man eating his bacon and eggs. He looked up at me, went back to the bacon and eggs, picked up a cup of coffee, looked across and said, "Shit, things must be tough if you're going to be driving." I guess the best way to start my story is pretty much the way a fairy tale is. Once upon a time. I was born in Sydney in 1937 and moved to Melbourne when I was 3. I went to Melbourne High School, and that had roughly 1,200 pupils, but it was a great school for building a foundation. I still recall clearly the kettle drums being played, the unfurling of the flag, and standing to attention with my hand on my heart and repeating the following words. And these words I first picked up 60 years ago, and they are still indelibly placed in my brain. And it goes, "I love God and my country. I will honour the flag, and I will cheerfully obey my parents, teachers, and the Lord." This was a foundation that I have carried all through my life. I was a 16-year-old high school dropout. My cousin got his name on the honour board for academia. I carved my name on the desk. But it was a great education, and it has carried me all the way through my life. At 16-year-old, I convinced an old truck wrecker to sell me a truck on 4 quarterly 100-pound payments. I must have been a good talker because he accepted my proposition. Those promissory payments were made, and my real issue at that time was to get a driver's license. You needed to be 18. But I found out that if I told the officer that was testing me that I was 19, he wouldn't ask for my birth certificate. But as you get older, you like to bring your age back to reality. I told them on my license I was born on the 19th of April 1933. And when my 10-year renewal came up 2 years ago, I sent them a note back, "No, I was born on the 19th of April 1937, you must have made a mistake." The bureaucrat sent me back a note and said, "No, you were born in 1933. The initial goal in those days was to work 3 days a week and get £10 a day. My initial involvement in the industry was to cart 12 tonne of 150-pound sacks of coal during the winter, and during the summer, Coca-Cola and Schweppes. In those days, I never knew the difference between gross and net as far as the income was concerned. It didn't take me long to learn. When I turned 18, I went into national service and did my 6 months in the army, and during that period all I did was taught drivers how to drive trucks, and that in itself was quite an education. At 22 years of age, I had 5 trucks and married my schoolgirl sweetheart Paula. 51 years later, I always figured I was training her, but I've come to the conclusion I've been the one that's been thrown. I stopped driving at the end of that period and commenced selling the services of a logistics and transport company. BP was the major account, delivering heating oil in the winter and soft drink deliveries in the summer, and ultimately getting 12 months utilisation of the fleet of trucks, where both of those companies only got 6 months. During this period, there was no accounting control. We worked like the corner store. If there was money in the till, we were doing okay. If there was no money in the till, we were going to have some problems. I guess a lot of the motivation came from my wife. A man called Rex Davison was the bank manager at the ANZ Bank. And on one occasion he rang me up. He said, "Lindsay," and this is 1970, "Lindsay, Paula's account is $20,000 overdrawn." In 1970, that was quite a lot of money. So I walked in the back door while my wife was preparing dinner. I looked at her squarely between the eyes and said, "How the shit did you get $20,000 overdrawn?" She looked squarely back at mine and said, "You just don't put it in fast enough." From that day to this, we've never had an issue on money. Today, at that particular time, I had 6 children and 60 trucks. My wife was a good Catholic. I was a careless Protestant. We started building warehouses for our customers in those days, and that business today has grown unbelievably so. In 1978, we had an operation covering all the aspects of Australia, and each customer that we had became the opening for the business in another state and ultimately in other countries. So in 1983 we went to New Zealand. By 1990 we went to Asia and was operating in 10, I think, countries in Asia. And in 2005, or 2000, we won the contract to do all of the logistics for the Olympics in Sydney. 2005, we bought a 130-year-old transport company called Mayne Nicholas, who was the largest transport company in Australia. And in that we got a company called Armaguard, which carts 80% of all the cash in the Australian economy. We cart over $1 billion a day. We moved into India in 2007, and when you put India alongside of the Asia-Pacífico region, you have 3.4 billion people, half the population of the world. Of that 3.4 billion people, 3%, for the first time in their lives, have disposable income. So each year, you have over 100 million potential new customers. When you live in Australia with 21 million population, you see the magnitude 5 times greater in the country of your origin. So what's going on in India, China, is absolutely unbelievable. 2008 in Australia started the mining boom, very similar to the gold rush in California or in the early days in Australia. Iron ore, coal, copper, uranium, and that's really keeping the Australian economy going at a very top level today. Barrow Island is probably one of the biggest gas fields in the world, a joint venture between Chevron and Exxon, and that's a project that probably will take another 5 years to develop. We recently bought 250 road trains just to get the equipment there to build the plant on Barrow Island. All of this business really came out of the standards we established in safety and reliability. We set a zero tolerance policy, and we random test everybody in the company for drugs, liquor, and also check their records on speed. The company has always stood by a promise made is a debt unpaid. And that applies with virtually everything that we do. Succession is important. 18 years ago, my eldest son, Peter, was appointed chairman. And when Peter was 6 years of age, his mother gave birth to another boy, which made 4 boys in the family. And this 6-year-old boy went up to his mother and said, "Mum," she said, "Yes, son, when Dad dies, does this mean I won't get as many trucks?" So he was already being geared up at 6 years of age to come in and be involved in running the business. And I must say, he's been a hell of a lot more successful than I was, which, for a father, gives you a great deal of satisfaction. Today, Linfox employs 22,000 people in 11 countries, pays wages in excess of $3 million a day, operates a fleet of 6,000 trucks, and buys about 1,000 new trucks a year. We operate 500 armoured cars. We have 3,238 revolvers. When I told the chief of police, he nearly filled his pants. He thought I was going to have a private war. We travel 675 million kilometres a year. We're the largest user of toll roads throughout Australia. We're the second largest intermodal rail user. We have reduced our carbon emissions by 36% since 06-07 levels. We have reduced our accidents by 90% over the last 3 years. And we own and operate 2 airports. We have 250 warehouses the same size as your football stadium. You may ask, how did you do it? People, good quality people, that I use the words TIL, the TIL principle. T stands for trust. If you half trust somebody, you have declared you don't trust them, and you shouldn't deal with them. I stands for integrity. If they have no integrity, you shouldn't be dealing with them. And L is for loyalty. Give me somebody with 100% loyalty and 80% ability before I'll accept the reverse situation. Customers. We always have gone for blue chip customers that have to fulfill the following requirements. To be in business 10 years from today, and probably the bluest of blue chip, but the most important thing is they need to be able to pay their bills every 7 days. This is where we first learned about cash flow, where we get the money in quick and pay it out slowly. When you start with no money at all, I can assure you that that works. You need to do it on the basis that you talk to your suppliers and you set up an arrangement where those things are applicable as the standard trading measure. And if you fulfil those obligations, your credibility will be maintained extremely high. Most of these financial arrangements were applicable to our truck manufacturers, the tyre people, the spare parts. We used to have consignment stock in spare parts. And the company would come in and look and see what parts we used, and then they'd charge us. That was very, very advantageous. Insurance, we used to pay quarterly payments rather than pay out a big lump sum at once. And the whole key to those formative years was cash flow. And the easiest way to think of cash flow is the moment the blood stops flowing in your body, you're dead. D-E-A-D. In a business, if the cash flow doesn't run through the business, it's all over. So we sort of took a tremendous amount of time to ensure that our cash flow was extremely good. Mark Twain said, the harder you work, the luckier you become. And probably the best example of that are the Olympians, who work and train hard for 4 years to get a little piece of gold, a little piece of copper, or a little piece of silver. They commit themselves just to achieve that, because in work, job satisfaction is the key criteria. And in the case of the Olympian, it's not the money, it's he has set his sights on an outcome that makes him the world's best at what he's trying to prove in the athletic field. Henry Ford was another one that said, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Think about that. If you think you can and you think you can't, it's self-explanatory. If you go into something and don't believe